John Coltrane, and a moment's notice. My guest today is Greg Carmichael, the co-founder of Acoustic Alchemy. When you first got, we were talking about the very first recording in Nashville, or rather, the very first recording for a Nashville company. But you actually made the album in Germany. It was called Red Dust and Spanish Lace.
Yeah.
Why Germany?
That was because of John Parsons. Nick was quite insistent that the guy to produce this would be John Parsons, because Nick went to the Leeds College of Music where he did jazz guitar, and John Parsons was doing it at the same time, and John Parsons obviously impressed Nick. I can see why. And John Parsons at that time was living in Bonn, in Cologne, which is near where the studio is. The studio is actually in Bonn. So rather than do record in England or in London, which would have made sense because we both live there, he thought and do it with an unknown someone, or someone that we didn't know if they would get into the music, like the music, or know anything about guitars. We went to we did in Germany, which is where John Parsons was living, and he produced it.
That tradition has continued almost throughout the 25 years of Acoustic Alchemy's existence, because you've, I think without exception, you've done virtually all of your albums at Hansa House Studios in Bonn with Klaus Genwait. That's
right. Yeah, I think.
You obviously like the guy.
Yeah, no, because Klaus. Things about Klaus is he's a perfectionist. He's absolutely totally dedicated. He'll give you all of his time. Nothing's ever a problem, and he treats it as if it's his own, which is quite an amazing thing. You never feel like you're under pressure. He's helped me immensely with recording the guitar. There are times when I've felt like giving up because I just can't get it right, or I can't do it. The solo's rubbish, and he's kind of helped me through. And it's a beautiful studio, and he's so sincere, about the whole thing. So once you've kind of worked with him, you think, well, we'll do the second one with him, and so it's carried on and on.
When the first album came out, Red Dust and Spanish Lace, although unknown to English people where you were born, the Americans suddenly started to take New Age quite seriously, and I think a station in Los Angeles called The Wave initially picked up on this particular album and played lots of tracks from it, and it spread gradually across the country, because I think at the time the kind of New Age stations, which later became smooth jazz, suddenly had something that they found that they liked and wanted to play, and that offered you an opportunity to go and work there for the first time. And I think Dallas was the first place you went to.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Dallas, the Arcadia Theatre, our very first gig on American soil. I remember it really well, and the thing that got me the most was that we'd start playing Ricochet, and they started clapping because they knew it. They knew this track. They'd heard it on the radio and they liked it. And
I think it was the Oasis in Dallas, wasn't it, that played?
The Oasis radio station, yeah. And so this was very exciting because never before anything that we performed in England or written would have been recognised, and so that was just great that they to have that kind of reception.
And that opportunity to tour lasted an awful long time. The band was constantly going back and forward to America. Was it kind of strange that you didn't do gigs in England? Did your family actually think that you might be kidding when you said you played in a band?
No, it was quite tough. I all my children. My eldest was born in '83.
You have three daughters.
Three daughters, yeah. So then my middle one, born in '85, was when I met Nick, and Penny, born in '87. So as they were growing up, I was away an awful lot. I was away a lot. But on the other hand, when I was back, I was around to be able to be involved.
The strange thing actually is that before England opened up a little bit, you started to go out to the Far East and places like that. So Japan and Korea and Philippines.
There were some years where we were just incredibly busy, and that really, I suppose, was the real kind of peak of what we were doing in terms of the amount we were touring. And I think that coincided with an album called Against the Grain, and we were just out on the road all the time. There was one year we were out pretty much an awful lot of it, but you take those, you at that age you take that, because I thought that it would pay off and it would secure me, financially, and from all that I was able to sort of buy my house, and so yeah. But obviously you have to have the support from my wife, because she was sort of left on her own a lot of the time.
We'll take another track now. This one's by an English performer with an American name, Elvis Costello. What attracted you to this?
Yeah, that came out in the 80s, didn't it? It came out, I guess, we're talking, early 80s, 81, 82. Music had gone through it, punk had happened, and I remember distinctly, I've got of myself, a keyboard player called Terry Disley, this violinist chap. We were in Terry's band called Blitzfish, and I remember the violinist brought in, he said, "Look what I've just got. I've got this single. It's by the Sex Pistols. It's called God Save the Queen." And he put it on. We went, what the hell is that all about? Just sounded like a noise. When I listen to it now, actually, I think it's a bloody great track. So you had this sort of whole punk thing, which I couldn't really, latch onto. It wasn't where my head was at all. But then you had people like Elvis Costello, and I really like this track. I think it was extremely well written, great melody, great lyrics, and that kind of, for me, kind of stood out.
The acceptable face of punk. Elvis Costello. Here we go. Oliver's Army. That was Oliver's Army by the fantastic Elvis Costello, whose wife recorded for the record label that you went to from MCA. MCA kind of decided not to have a jazz label, and they sold their interest to a company in New York called GRP. Do you remember much about working for GRP?
Yeah, it was very exciting. Working for GRP felt proper. It felt like it was a proper record label. They had proper budgets. They had proper art departments, proper PR people. Everything about it was what you would expect from a record company. When you went to see them, they got you a limousine. It was just absolutely fantastic. The expenses, take out to beautiful meals. Everything about it was made you feel like you were some kind of rock star. Yeah.
Throughout Acoustic Alchemy's career, they've managed to win virtually every award going. Best acoustic band, best this, best that. Probably, I think, about 200 different awards throughout the years. But I guess the one that you probably cherish the most is the fact that the band has been nominated for a Grammy on 3 occasions. What was that like to find that you'd been nominated?
Wonderful. One of those things that you had to go to.
What was it like?
Rubbing shoulders with these amazing other stars, Diana Ross. I mean, they're all. You were found yourself in amongst, the people that and stars and musicians that you'd perhaps idolised for years and years and years as a kid, and it was. A great event. You had to make sure that you had your, got dressed to the nines because everyone else was, and The strange thing about those events is that when actually your nomination comes up, your category comes up, and they say, so and so is nominated, and Acoustic Alchemy, and the winner is, and the envelope, and they say someone else's name, and then before you know it, they've moved on, and you're kind of slightly stunned. You want to feel like, you sure you got that right? Do you want to check that? But it was a great thing. I'd love to get one day. I'm not sure that's ever going to happen, but there you go.
Well, let's hope so anyway. I guess the next few years was a mixture, as we said, of touring both in America and around the world. And then very sad thing happened, of course, that people will know, is that Nick got ill and was diagnosed with having pancreatic cancer. What were your feelings at that stage? I mean, obviously you felt something towards Nick. What did you feel about it in terms of Acoustic Alchemy? Well,
that happened after that year that we'd spent out on the road, Far East. I mean, done so much touring, recording records. It was very strange. But Nick obviously, and we and everyone else obviously thought he was going to beat this thing. It was a kind of temporary interruption. And
because you were recording an album at the time.
Yeah, we'd Positive Thinking. So we had to sort of slightly change things. I mean, Nick had moved out of London. He still kept his flat in London, but he actually was residing near Bath, in the West Country. But he would have to come up to London because all the hospitals were there, for treatment. And so when he did, he'd come up for a couple of days before, and we were writing this stuff for this next record, which became Positive Thinking. And then he'd go in for his treatment, and that would just wipe him out completely. And it was, that's how we kind of carried on for that year, really. Very terrible. I mean, sometimes he was really well, and other times he was white.
And so Nick eventually died, and you were left in a situation where, what was the future? I mean, how did you view it at that stage? And how did you think about, what did you think about with the album at that point?
Well, the thing is that when these things happen, you don't really have time to think, do you? You don't really think about, things just happen and you react to them, and you kind of go along with what happens. Because when he died, we were actually, because Miles was also there. We were working on this record, Positive Thinking, and he died before we even started recording it. We'd kind of gone to the trouble of hiring this manor house near where he lived in Bath, and set up a recording studio, portable recording studio, and with the idea that he could come in to play some guitar for an hour or so when he was feeling quite good. Then it wasn't so far for him to have to go back home. But sadly, he died before he even had a chance to put down any guitar.
And so you got John Parsons.
So yeah, the obvious choice was John Parsons, because to play that, which he did. But things just happened, don't they? John Parsons came in, did that, and you feel like you had to finish the record. One thing led to another. You think it's important to tour it because that's what Nick would have wanted, and so we kind of kept going.
So you went to, after Nick's death, you went to America with this album and went on tour with John Parsons playing Nick's parts.
Yeah.
And how did that go?
And Miles playing electric guitar. I was incredibly nervous because Nick was very much a presence, on stage. I mean, he was kind of the guy who did most of the talking, and because he'd been to drama school, that was his thing. He was good at that. He was very, very good at that. And so I thought, how are we going to do this without him? And I guess the fans knew that. They must, people are not stupid. They know what people can do and what they can't do. But I think they just wanted the band to keep going because they liked the music so much, and it was getting that kind of feedback and that support that made us think that it was worthwhile. But having said that, what the other thing that really kept it going was Miles, because we started the next record, Beautiful Game.
Just before you do that, let's take another track and we'll discuss this. This one's by Pat Metheny. A favourite?
A favourite
artist?
A favourite artist? Oh, it's just an immense guitarist. In fact, you see, I actually was introduced to Pat Metheny funnily enough, by Dave Pomeroy. Dave Pomeroy was the American bass player who also introduced us to, because he's American living in Nashville, also introduced us to the MCA, Tony Brown. He was the guy who picked Nick and I up from the airport and said, you take this to Tony Brown. But because Dave had spent a year in England, he lived with me for about a year. And he had this record, and we're talking about, 1977, 78? Had this record, but it must have been one of that very early Pat Metheny record. And he said, check this guy out, he's really, really good. Played it, and I thought it sounded really good. Didn't quite, my head was somewhere else. I didn't think it was amazing, but I thought he was a great guitarist. And then subsequently over the years, I've grown to absolutely love him. And this particular track, for me, gets me every time. I just think it's just a wonderful track. It's a long track, but it's just got an amazing build, and I love it. It's from an album called Off Ramp, and it's called Are You Going With Me?
Let's listen to it. Are You Going With Me by Pat Metheny. You're listening to Radio Alchemy with Greg Carmichael. We talked a little bit about Miles. The strange thing is that I guess most people, most fans, most people on the road think of Miles Gilderdale as being somebody who came in to replace Nick when he died. But in fact, that wasn't the case. He actually was in the band before, quite a while before.
Yeah,
Nick.
He was, yeah. I mean, also, I think most people on the road now think, because the band's been going so long, probably have no, and there's lots of new fans of
don't know about the past.
Don't know about the past at all. No, I mean, they assume that
Miles
has always been there.
Acoustic Alchemy, yeah. But Miles came in because I think the band decided that instead of having a keyboard, they would try it a little differently and have an electric guitar that played colours and this kind of thing behind the two acoustics with a bass player and a drummer. And Miles got the gig and came along. And after Nick died, and we thought about maybe John Parsons asking him, but actually in the end, that didn't really work. And Miles, unbelievably, kind of put his electric guitar down and learned to play an acoustic guitar.
Yeah, it's quite a leap from an electric guitar to a steel string acoustic guitar, as it is just as much a leap from a nylon string to a steel string, or vice versa. They're completely different instruments and require completely different approaches and techniques, etc. And when I first met Miles, I always liked him. I thought it was really. Did
you? Obviously, you had to sit down at some stage and write some tunes together.
Yeah.
Particularly from memory, I think things like "Angel of the South" and I think that was the first.
That was
tune
the first one we
did.
I mean, it's always hard actually because writing with someone is quite an intimate thing, really.
Stylistically, how different is he to Nick?
Stylistically, well, Nick kind of came from the folk school. I mean, his acoustic playing was kind of based on, the Burt Jansch. I mean, that whole kind of folk, the steel string picking, John Martin, that thing. Miles didn't come from that. He was playing, the electric guitar. I mean, I don't know very much about Miles's past. I know that he had a band called Zoot and the Roots, and but he was playing electric. So he approached the steel string acoustic guitar from a sort of a different school.
But in terms of writing, did you find it easier, harder to do it?
No, none of those really. I mean, it was just different, But like I say, it's actually quite hard to change your writing partner because I got very used to the way Nick worked, and him the same with me. So to have someone else to write with, because it's writing can be quite arduous. I mean, you're with someone, and when it's going well, it's great, and when it's not, but you can't just say, all right, walk away. Or
so at that stage, you almost had to start again because GRP decided not to pick up the option.
They did, after Positive Thinking. I mean, it was kind of a bit of a strange one, really, because Positive Thinking was the last GRP record. That was when Nick died. It was almost like starting again. Yeah.
And you went to this little record label, boutique label, called Higher Octave, who were based right in Santa Monica, just up the coast there. Quite an interesting label. I had a couple of artists who'd sold millions of records, etc. And the great thing, I guess, for you, being a football fan, being an Arsenal fan, was that when it came to naming the album, you called it Beautiful Game, and they gave you the fantastic opportunity to go to Wembley Stadium, which was about to be knocked down. Wembley Stadium, for those who don't know, it was the kind of national home of soccer in England. And the stadium was knocked down for a brand new stadium, but we, as Acoustic Alchemy, went along and essentially was there just before.
Yeah, just before the bulldozers came in. Exactly.
What was that like?
Oh, it was amazing. Sat in the seats. Weren't allowed to go on the turf. I think they had one more game to play. I think they were scheduled for a game that weekend literally before they pull the whole thing down. And my football table features in the cover as well. We were playing table football right next to the pitch. Now that was fantastic. It was quite interesting going from GRP to Higher Octave, a very different sort of thing. GRP being, like I say, the sort of big spending record company who nothing was a problem. And so this was a new era. Higher Octave, it was a much tighter budget, and it wasn't, they wouldn't be sending out no limousines to come and get you.
Well, they did let you go to Wembley, which wasn't too bad.
Yeah.
And over the next kind of 10-year period, apart from another Grammy nomination, you also changed record companies because EMI, who owned Higher Octave, kind of shut down their various divisions, and you went to Narada in Milwaukee, then eventually to Blue Note in New York.
They're also the EMI.
Yeah, they're all EMI companies that you just kind of moved along. But by this time, you had a kind of a steady band, having gone through, lots of different people to play in Acoustic Alchemy, all of them very good musicians. For the last several years, you've had a band that's been quite steady, featuring the Granger brothers.
Yeah.
How did you meet them?
Well, I met Greg first. He was introduced to us by Frank Felix, bass player, because he'd worked with him, I think, in Lonnie Liston Smith. And we were looking for another drummer, and Frank recommended Greg. And Greg's still there. Great guy.
And his brother now plays
and latterly his brother joined, Gary, who's also an amazing bass player.
Yeah. Both of them come from Baltimore, and all of them have this fantastic kind of background.
They've done all sorts of things.
Yeah. And we also use a guy called Julian Crampton, who's another wonderful bass player.
Yeah,
and he comes from London, and so that's the forms of the nucleus. And also you have a keyboard player, Fred White, who's been there a long time.
Yeah, who was he was introduced to us by our manager Stewart Coxhead, because I think Stewart was teaching at in Leeds. I'm not sure if he was teaching at the Leeds College of Music. I think he was anyway. He was taking a class, and Fred was one of his students. And when we were looking for a keyboard player, he said, check out Fred. And so I came up to Leeds, to where Fred lived. I mean, Fred was a young lad then. He was only 21, but immensely talented, and good writer as well. He, so he contributed to the writing as well.
Do you think that it helps when you're touring to have a settled band? In other words, people that you get on with and know both on and off the stage?
Oh yeah, definitely. Oh, for sure. I mean,
do you see it as a kind of an adventure, or?
Do you mean the touring is?
Yeah.
Well, it's always nice. I suppose it's not quite as romantic as it perhaps used to be. But it's still interesting. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's. I suppose you're asking me because, I mean, don't forget, like I said, in the heyday from GRP, all the sort of the extras that you used to get with touring are not there now. So it's a little more leaner, but
challenging.
Challenging. Yeah, but I'm sure that applies to a lot of people. I mean, we're not the young new band that we were 25 years ago.
But you're still touring, you're still making records. What of the future? I mean, how do you see Acoustic Alchemy for the next 5 years or so?
To be honest with you, I don't really think about the future. No. I don't think about the future too much.
What have you ever thought about the future?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose when when you're mid-career, I guess, or at the beginning of your career, you're always thinking, "Oh, what's coming next?" Now I'm just pretty happy, so I don't really, to be honest, I don't really think that far ahead.
Do you still get the same? I mean, I know that, as you said, things are different, and obviously money's not as available, and that things are a little tighter because they are for everybody. Do you still get the same thrill on stage playing for an audience, particularly in the States, and now that England has opened up a little bit in England as well? Do you still get that same thrill when you do it, or has that gone a little bit?
No, I still really like playing. I mean, I like playing and I like performing. Yeah, and it's a great feeling when you play a track and it's gone really well. You feel like we've played that very, very well, and
so it's a combination of how well you think the band has played it and your part, as well as the adulation of the audience.
Yeah, to be honest, I've never been, the adulation of the audience is great. I mean, I don't really see it as adulation. I see it as more that them being part of the experience of what we're doing. I don't need to get up on stage and have people scream for me to feel good about things.
But I mean, you've always, in 25 years, always after the show gone out and you talk to people and sign stuff.
Yeah, but it's not about me. It's
no.
Yeah, no. It's about what we've just done, what the band has done, and it's it's the whole thing. It's the whole shared experience, and we're that if you like is the experience, and we're all part of that experience. And if it goes well, brilliant. I mean, I love it.
Great.
It makes me feel good.
Very good. Well, Greg, thank you very much for talking to us today. Can I just ask you what this last track is? It's by Coldplay, I believe.
Yeah. It's funny because when you reach a certain age, of which I've reached, and suddenly the music in the media is not for you. It's not about you. It's nothing to do with you. It's a young person's music. You try and keep up. People say, "Well, what are you listening to these days?" And you think, "Oh my God, I better think about what I've been listening to." And sometimes something you've heard catches you, and I think Coldplay, a bit like the Beatles, they appealed to my daughters. They had a big student thing, but they also appeal to people my generation. Because you will find when you go into a record shop, that someone looking through the Coldplay might not necessarily be 18. They could be 40, 50, and I like Coldplay a lot. I think they've written some great songs, and it's one of the few bands I think that has kind of made me feel that I'm still a little bit in touch. And this is again, like the Beatles, very hard to pick on one particular track, but I like this track.
And it's called
The Hardest Part.
Thank you. Cut.